Alright, it's the Masquerade JT33 featuring Symbia. Thanks everyone for joining. Link to the track is in minds.com/Infinite Plane Society, the notes. Everything we discuss goes there. Any of the leads, links, images, memes, they all go to minds.com, which is a safe space for unsafe memes. They're not going to get deleted. Like this one here. Someone actually saw this sign in South Carolina. Surprised it hasn't burned yet. It says, "Stop fentanyl abuse. All lives matter." And it's got George Floyd. Very offensive. We all know he was killed by climate change. I can hardly breathe when I look at what the fossil fuels have done to our atmosphere. All right, we're joined by AJ206, Copaesthetic, Osher, Benton, David Hazel, T-Dog135, Thirst for Truth, Linda Curtis. All right, East Coast appreciates the time slot, says AJ206. And I did go through the notes, and a lot of people are asking me to get back on TuneIn. I will. I'm going to be on every single platform. We got tanked, but we're back on. And we have like 728 episodes, and they just get pulled. And I didn't really think about the full implications of it, but I had a lot of reviews on Apple, even on Audible. But Apple in particular, I had like 56 reviews, and I'm going to miss those. I had one single star review who said, "This guy sounds like the Steve Ducey of Alex Jones's. This is the reason why we can't have nice things." Basically blaming me for the world's problems, but all those reviews have been lost. But we'll have to get some new ones. And if you are listening on a podcast platform, feel free to review it and share it if you care to. I never really talked about it at the time because we're trying to stay under the radar. Here we are creeping around on YouTube with 100 subs. But on the podcast platforms, we have thousands. And we were kind of making it look like we were small. Smaller than we've been trying to downplay just how massive of a thing off-world stage media is going to be. It's a little too late now. Thinks he's a penguin 101 says present. Yes, I sent out the text alerts and live stream notifications. Tomanoid2 says George Floyd brought to you by Corona Light. Yeah, if you recall, the photo of him you first saw was posing next to a Corona on a poster that had these COVIDs in the background. Well, that was at the nightclub where he worked with his BFF forever, Derek Chauvin. They worked together. And there were a few other stories that got scrubbed that showed you how the whole thing was just a psyop. All right, let us continue. The big news of the moment right now, a couple of things. One, the war in Ukraine is coming to an end. Quote, "This is the beginning of the end of the war," says Zelensky. He's going around to the different areas where they staged this LARP, these mass casualty drills, this major psyop. He's going around to the various stages of this theater of war and basically saying, okay, this has been great. Show's just about over. That's one of the things. The other is this, and this is just from an hour ago. The January 6th committee. Former President Trump has refused to comply with the Select Committee subpoena, requiring him to appear for a deposition. His attorneys have made no attempt to negotiate an appearance, and his lawsuit parades out many of the same arguments that courts have rejected repeatedly. There you have it. Donald Trump is not complying. Now tomorrow, the 15th, he has a big announcement, and I have a few people kind of suggesting that the announcement's going to be more than just he's running for president. There's some intimation here that he may actually start his own party. Let me go ahead and play this clip. Is Trump going to announce a new party? Now, the three individuals you're looking at here, this is Joel Altman, Apollo, and David Clements. This is on Jim Stewartson's Vimeo. He puts a soundtrack on here to mock them because he's a radical leftist and hates these guys because they're radical rightists. But the guy in the middle is interesting to me. David Clements, and you'll note if you've seen him before, he was the face of the Cyber Symposium along with the Pillowmaker, Mike Lindell, and Code Monkey Z, then 33-year-old Ron Watkins, believed by many to be Q. He's not. But this guy David Clements is believed by some QAnoners to be time-traveling Ingersoll Lockwood, the author of those books about Barron Trump, the time traveler. Yeah, and he does look like Ingersoll Lockwood, but many thought this is him. More recently, there's speculation that this is JFK Jr. in a mask, but who isn't JFK Jr. these days? Let me go ahead and play this clip. This is David Clements, Joel Oatman, and Apollo talking about Trump's third party announcement tomorrow.
And I hope that announcement tomorrow is that President Trump has a new party, because I certainly think that will bankrupt the GOP. It will suck the life out of the Democrat Party, and it'll move independence to a place where it is America first. David, I'll give you the last word.
I haven't wrestled with the new party thing until you actually brought it up today. And I'll be lying to you if my chest didn't swell up with hope at the prospect of, if you wanted to rip the spine out of a feckless party. There's only one man that can do that, by the way. Yeah. I couldn't do it.
Again, the title of tonight's live stream is HOPIUM, COPIUM, Sore Loserism. I mean, at this point, we all know, and they all know, that they're all crooks on both sides. It's an election rigging contest, and now it's a contest to steal the election rigging capabilities. I mean, at this point, nobody here is, to me, able to really claim to be victims in this game. It's just politics as usual, and it's even worse in Brazil, where they're saying Bolsonaro, who's calling the election a hoax, is a pedovore, cannibal, and all that. Like, they're throwing the accusations that we make against our Democrats against him, and he's the election denier. Anyway, let me go and play the rest of this.
I proposed a new party, but I'm telling you, 70% plus would leave the party in a heartbeat based on what they just saw. Hopefully Trump knows it. And it's going to take something that revolutionary to remind people who the boss is.
100%.
So,
100%. 100%. Sleepy Random says, have you looked into the FTX rabbit hole? Yes, we will address that here momentarily. In fact, I have a bit of meta-scripting and a lot of interesting symbolism that's cropped up in the last couple of days that I want to get to. But as far as the FTX thing, and that's huge. It's going to be difficult to overstate that. It's just started. But I did notice the guy's name was kind of funny. Like Bankman. Remember Bernie Madoff, Goldman Sachs? Now you got Bankman, and he fried the bank. These are all fake. And he's the nerd in, I think they call him the devil in nerd's clothing. And I'm like, okay, if you can't tell, he's a construct. He's the face. And I see him with stains on his shirt. His shoes are kind of wacky. He's got shorts on. He doesn't look like a billionaire. Not at all. And that's intentional. It's a costume. And I saw this article by Forbes. They called him the devil in nerd's clothing. It's like, yeah, who didn't see that? And we will look into that. Again, totally scripted and hoaxy, for sure, but we'll dig. Joined by Done Being Nice Raho, Portal Complex, Garrett Summers, Randy H. New party or Speaker of the House 2024 run is too obvious. Could be. I know there's a great deal of resentment from the GOP. They're trying to really, I think, whatever they're doing, they're kind of positioning to make him seem unviable, like he's responsible for their losses. And it was a big loss for QAnoners. The storm was less than a storm. It wasn't a tsunami by any stretch. I thought it was going to be, based on the prediction of Dr. Joe Rogan. Thinks he's a Penguin 101 says, man, that's the biggest shot of hopium I've ever seen. Yeah, that's some serious coping right there. But now, just to dispense with any kind of I don't want to give anybody any hope here, that Dave Clements is Ingersoll Lockwood, time traveler, here to save the election. Nor is he JFK Jr., even though this is floating around Twitter right now. And look, you can take a picture of anybody on a profile and anybody else, and you can line it up just right. And what happens, I think, is intriguing. Because, okay, well, look, there is a similarity if you look at their profile. Now, there's a similarity between everyone's profile. We all have the same basic features. And when you're animating, you'll draw 5 different faces, but it's the same person. You just leave it up to the person in their own imagination as they're watching it. It's an interactive process to fill in the blanks, to make sure that they're still perceiving this cartoon as one entity, even though it's many disparate drawings. And I think that same process occurs when you look at two photos like this that are posited as being the same person. I think your mind fills in the blanks. I don't think they're the same person. Now, I did a little digging into Dave Clemens, and a few years ago he didn't have that wild hair or beard or mustache, which makes me think that maybe this is part of the con. Like they created this mess. This whole QAnon thing is a masterpiece. They created this for a few reasons. Discrediting the right. I think this is part of a psyop, largely part of General Flynn's work here. And I think what he has done is he's created in America the perception that we have the equivalent of radical Islam. But instead of being QAnon radicals, they're Quran radicals, domestic versus external. But here is Dave Clemens a few years ago, before he found Q, before he turned into Ingersoll Lockwood. Looks like two different people. Just pointing it out here. Oftentimes the hopium being passed around is bad hopium. You could just scratch the surface and you find out that's not real. It's not real at all. Speaking of, I don't want to say anything bad about this particular drug, but I will say this. UNICEF is going really far to sell people on the vax. Look at this commercial. Sex sells, apparently. They're trying to model, or rather sell, this vax like it's a perfume. They have a model here who's lusting over the vaccine, licking the bottle.
I feel a rush when I'm around you. I try not to blush, but I'm bound to. It's not enough that I love you, 'cause you don't love me.
Let's make it accessible for everyone. Got a comment from Lloyd Miller to address. He was kicked out of our Discord server, but he's joined over at Substack. He says, I sometimes think you apply the concept of the world stage construct too liberally, as I think more people on the metaphorical world stage are manipulated than given a script. But you are 100% right with Elon Musk. Anyone paid by the government to fake space exploration and posit Mars colonies must be closely controlled in all his activities. Calling his clunker a starship when it's only proposed to go to Mars is still far too far by standard science to be credible, and it gives it all away. Right. Yeah, he went from Mars to Twitter. It's like shiny new object syndrome. Mars was interesting, Mars was cool, it got a lot of attention, kind of milked it, but what's the point of going? He already got all the attention. Now he's doing Twitter. I don't think that he can stick to one thing long enough to get us to Mars. Commenter here says, Murr says, what on earth is wrong with people? Complete misunderstanding of how stuff works. Just a need to interfere. What are you referring to? I mean, I think you're right for the most part, but I'm kind of curious as to what, because I think what's happened is there's been a great inversion in our epistemology collectively, where I think people have mistaken fake for real, real for fake, and they just need help. But no doubt Elon Musk is a manufactured hero for the right. Just like Kanye West. You think they're heroes? I don't know. What are the odds? If Musk is an insider, and he's friends with Kanye, to me, I'm just like, to me, all these insiders run together. They don't really have any outsiders in their midst. It's not a coincidence that his non-binary birthing person, Grimes, left him publicly. That was part of this kind of, I think, creation of Musk as a right-winger and his politics and he called pronouns some kind of an aesthetic nightmare. It's like it's just grammar, but the whole point of it is he's married to someone who was non-binary before they got married, and then he has this public kind of issue with it. Yeah, it's all manufactured and fake. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Grimes was fake. I've kind of considered that maybe she's literally an avatar played by Musk himself, that she doesn't have an actual physical counterpart, and that maybe their kids are all animatronic 3D printed things. I could be wrong. I mean, it's just a strange family. Now, Elon Musk's father, at 75, I mean, this is crazy. He's 42 years older than his daughter that he just had a baby with. What's with the number 42 and all these weird elitists? 42 years older than his daughter, who I think she's 33 now. And they just had a baby. Yep, you heard that right. That's Elon Musk. Mark Wahlberg wakes up every day at 3:30. Yeah, he's got an alarm clock. He wakes up, he takes his shot of adrenochrome, goes back to bed. Total sellout. It has to be. He was in that movie about the Boston bombing, only in the movie it was real. And in the movie they gave you a warning, like graphic warning. This was very disturbing. It's like, wait a minute here. That looks realer than what was on the news. But they're giving you the graphic warning not for the special effects, but for the insert shots from the news, where they had the very bad amputee actors pretending like a bomb went off. G33 says, can't trust a billionaire. Oh, if they're in the triple comma club, no, you cannot trust them. Tyrone McCloskey says, Musk is Channing Tatum in a mask. Musk, the name gives it away. Mask. I'll have to look into that. There's, Pete Shea is convinced that Elon Musk is being portrayed by some other comedian. The guy who was in the Orville. Now, the Orville is an interesting study in itself. I might actually have to watch it. Seth MacFarlane is the Captain Kirk-like leader in this ship. I watched a few. It's just a science fiction comedy drama, kind of like NASA. Seth MacFarlane, though, does look kind of similar to Musk. But their bodies are different. Their skulls are different. The timelines don't match. But it does seem likely to me that if you were to, like I've been suggesting that Musk is just a composite. A little bit of Willy Wonka, a lot of Werner von Braun, some Iron Man, Tony Stark. But he might even have a bit of this Orville character in him. Like, there's no separating these world stage characters from their fictional counterparts. They create these composites. Seth MacFarlane is not literally Musk in my opinion, but there are some similarities. Now, in the Orville, I did watch one episode. The captain was talking about this ship, a generational ship, going to an exoplanet, meaning their grandkids are going to live to see it. And this ship is so perfect that from the outside, it looks like a meteor. It looks like a space rock just covered. It's just because it's armored. But it's so perfect they recycle everything that it has no contact with the space outside of it. It's a perfect enclosed system. Well, by the time the third generation grows up, they kind of forget they're going anywhere. They forget there's any universe outside of this generational ship. And they posited this as some kind of ideal. Like, this is what we should strive for. And this is what they are trying to get us to strive for with this idea of Earth as spaceship Earth. And we have to make sustainability our primary objective here. A civilization of stasis. Lock it down if you have to save the planet. Every one of these space movies is just conditioning you for the eventual conditions that you'll be convinced are necessary here on Earth for the sky not to fall. Or the oceans not to rise any more than they have. I do think the oceans went up a millimeter because of all the PPE. Like, if you see I hate to say it, but if you see a dead sea turtle with like a PPE bikini like cut through its body, like it grew up with masks and stuff wrapped around its neck, that's the fault of whoever didn't put their mask in a red biohazard container. And like, raise your hand if you actually put your masks in red biohazard containers. I don't think anybody here did. It all went to the ocean, all of it. And nobody cares about the oceans. Now it's all about space environmentalism. Joined by We says, howdy, eminent penguin folk. Thank you for joining. Maskless Faceless says, I'm 42. Yeah, 42 is the Elvis state, the Elvis's age of death. 42 is the number associated with the falling star, with Satan in a way. Very significant, though, that you take the number 4, which is like a cross, representing the 4 seasons. The number 2, which would it would connote cleaving in two, like a scythe. You put the 4 and the 2 together, and you get the astrological symbol for Saturn, and that's not unintentional that the number 42 is used interchangeably with other ways of representing Saturn, whether it's a cube, that number, hexagram, as we discuss often on this stage, because we analyze the hidden language of the cryptocrats that run this place. The ones who control the two parties. Maybe three parties, depending on what Trump does tomorrow. Faye's Polarizer says, a dolphin took my mask. I remember walking around in 2020 and I'd see masks on the ground and I'd think, how do people live without their immune systems? I kept expecting to find bodies around, like the next corner. Like, surely you can't walk more than 50 yards without that thing before you drop dead. But no, I guess we adapted. Speaking of space junk, 2 UK firms are developing space garbage trucks to grab defunct satellites. I have to take credit for this. I called this DARPA outfit in White Sands, New Mexico, where they monitor space junk, and I said, I have this idea for an orbiting trash compactor that would use electromagnetism to collect junk, crush it into cubes, stamp it with a logo, probably Amazon, and then spit it towards the moon. That way you'd have a pile of raw materials to work with in the future. Anyway, they said that I'm a civilian, I can't get into the space junk reclamation industry. That there are too many regulatory barriers thanks to Ronald Reagan, and that I had no chance. I gave up on that dream, but now other firms are getting into this. I had this idea as like a thought experiment that we ought to just create a CubeSat, like in CGI, just create a computer model, claim it's real, fake a rocket launch, again, CGI land, where everybody lives, and dare anyone to tell us it's not real. Who are they to say? I mean, we're talking about the people who thought that slice of salami that was presented as a distant star, 4.2 light years away, they believed it was real. They thought it was beautiful. The most beautiful star they ever saw. It went viral. It was so beautiful. Then they found out it was a piece of meat. A chunk of the meatverse. Tony Driscoll says, I want to be a space garbage man, but you probably have to get vaxxed. Yes, probably. I mean, if you think about it, one of the objectives of the space program, in my view, is to bottleneck humanity and really pick who gets to ascend into the heavens. Musk is like, I am the way, but if you can't afford a seat, if you're not willing to go into indentured servitude, back of the line. But even if you are, what's going to separate you from the others? And the only people who are allowed to go into space are, of course, the people who have been properly tested and vetted and vaxxed and cleaned and everything else. You have to be of the right state of mind. This is, to me, about engineering the person of the new age, the space age person, the space cadet. And the space cadets are like in that UK TV show called Space Cadets, where they were tricked into thinking they were in low Earth orbit. They chose people who were, I guess, kind of already space cadets, if you know what I mean. Like, they're not going to question anything. A spent Chinese rocket just mysteriously broke apart in low Earth orbit. This is from Forbes.com. U.S. Space Force, by the way, Space Force took over all military satellites. I think that means something, and we'll get into this, but U.S. Space Force confirmed on Saturday a Chinese rocket stage broke up over 500 kilometers over our heads on November the 12th, creating 50 new pieces of space junk at the same altitude as a number of SpaceX Starlink satellites and above where the ISS orbits. Plausible deniability? It says mysteriously broke apart. To me, this is foreshadowing. When the space station goes down, it's because China did something. When the Starlink satellites go out, it's because Russia is going to shoot them down. These are the space wars we're being prepped for. And last year, there was a tremendous amount of predictive programming at this time for exactly this. Don't Look Up, Moonfall, The 100, Raised by Wolves, everything about space stations falling from the sky, arcs falling from the sky. In fact, last year, I was watching Season 1, Episode 13 of The 100 on November the 30th, coincidentally, and the astronauts on that day had to go inside of the space station because of space junk. Meanwhile, The 100, Season 1, Episode 13, the space station comprised of 13 different nations joined into one station fell from the sky. That was the main theme of the episode. Interestingly, the episode also has this subterranean, like a base, a survivor shelter for the nuclear holocaust that occurred in this TV show. And one of the individuals in this underground base was storing a lot of artwork from the 20th century and previous. Anyway, he had a painting of the Tower of Babel in that episode where the space station fell. And I thought, that's interesting. I had been connecting these two things for some time, along with the numbers, of course. Season 1, episode 13, 113. That number 113 figures prominently in all of the Pixar films, but it's consistently used to represent this concept of the Tower of Babel falling, the need for a great reset, the West burning down, which we're getting to. Is Kanye West alluding to a connection to the Illuminati in the latest rant? We may get into that again. I talked about it earlier today. He's really going out there and naming names, people who are controlled by the Illuminati and people who aren't. And coincidentally, all of the people he's pointing at, Jay-Z, Beyonce, they're all known for flashing the signs and the symbols of the cult. Let me go ahead and play that before we get too much further. Go ahead and reiterate this. This is just a quick recap on Kanye West's world burning.
They can control Shaq. They can control Charles Barkley. They can control LeBron James. They can control Jay-Z and Beyonce.
But not you, man.
But they can't control me. You
Not
see, it
you.
ain't no name I won't name.
Exactly.
It's up. I don't care who you are. I ain't taking no slice from nobody, right? I ain't taking no slice from nobody. It's God. That's the only person that I serve. My mom ain't here. My mama was sacrificed.
Sacrificed. Now that's a pretty big claim. He's talking to paparazzi again.
Me too.
You understand?
Yeah. Appreciate
Michael Jordan, what about him? His daddy, right? Bill Cosby, his son, right? Dr. Dre, his son. Out in Hollywood, a lot of people come up missing. Feels like it might be a lot of that in order to control, traumatize. They want to monetize and traumatize.
Now
They can't control me.
I have to say, he is making a bit of sense. This is a scary story, and what he's telling is somewhat cohesive. It sounds very culty, like Hollywood's run by a bunch of witches or Satanists or something crazy like that. Fascinating. We'll continue to follow this story. Now, none of this is 100% entirely new, and I did see some attempts at refutation. We still have Stop Oil doing vandalism, eco-terrorism with a smile. These are the least scary terrorists I've ever seen. They all look like Harry Potter. They all do for some reason. Harry Potter's going to save the world from dino juice burners. Anyway, here's one of them, a Stop Oil activist flinging orange paint on a building for Gaia. Half of it on herself.
Why are you doing this?
Hello, I'm Lee, I'm 22 and I'm a student at the University of Aberdeen and I'm here today with Just Stop Oil. Basically, the reason why we are throwing paint on this building is because these buildings hold the offices for both Barclays and Shell in Aberdeen. And today we are doing this in solidarity with the Extinction Rebellion protesters.
Okay, they are, if you're not getting this, this is, I missed the name. This is from Stop Oil, but what they're explaining is that they are in solidarity with Extinction Rebellion, which makes no sense. Don't you want people to go extinct to save the planet? Like, make up your mind. But yeah, they're totally against oil painting. And you know what? I've been thinking about this, and I'm pretty sure it's staged. I don't think these galleries would do this, allow this to happen, and not throw these people in jail if it was real. It's not going to happen to your local gallery. We says, what idiots? Pete W says she eats paint chips. Copaesthetic says she's obviously confused. I think she's a true believer. I'm just glad she's not setting herself on fire like that kid at the tennis match. He was protesting private jets in the UK. He's like, stop private jets UK. And then he set himself on fire with something. It wasn't enough. It barely burned his arm and they extinguished it because he didn't believe in jet fuel. He didn't want to damage Gaia. But in the long run, it would have been a help if it had taken him out. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like Extinction Rebellion, don't they want us to go extinct? Got a tweet from Vegastar. Did you know that if you no longer accept the frequency of fear, you will no longer experience its effects in your life? Yeah, I agree with that. I think the news media wants you to accept the premise they set before fact-checking it. That way you can be scared, triggered. They can put you into a state of reacting and waiting to know what's next. I don't get triggered by the news. They can't trigger me. That's because I preemptively assume they're trying to. Like if you've ever been around a significantly manipulative person, once you figure out what they are, then you realize, okay, there's an intention behind everything. And that's how we really ought to look at pathologically lying media. Awakening Spirit says, incoming from President Trump announcement tomorrow, November the 15th. Okay, again, there's some speculation that he's going to start a third party. Others say he's going to run for Speaker of the House. Others say he's just going to run for, GOP or something. But this is from Q Street, the word on Q Street, and they're obsessed with anniversaries. November the 15th is the 245th anniversary of the first U.S. Constitution Articles of Confederacy, November 15th, 1777. And they believe that this is going to bring about Nasara 13, eliminating the Federal Reserve, free money for everyone, universal basic income, etc. Yeah, the right wing has their UBI. The fringe on the right, free money for everybody. Fringe on the left, free money for everybody. Although the fringe on the right is like MAGA, Make America Great Again, meaning going back to the past. It's kind of like idealizing the past. We've got to go back to the 50s or something. Now with the left, it's let's go to the future when we get past all this stuff. It's kind of interesting how they're the same. They really are. I mean, actually, one's a funhouse mirror version of the other. I mean, however you look at it, you cannot separate the two sides, but they're both promising the same thing. It's all just hopium. Phase Polarizer says Trump won, Mandela effect. At this point, that's a strategy. Everyone, and this is not new anyway. History just repeats itself. This is not new. Everybody calls everyone else a cheater and a faker. Hey, if you're looking at the screen, I have an image here of a really great special effects genius. And this is Stan Winston, deceased now, hanging out with Michael Jackson. Although you wouldn't know it's Michael Jackson because he's in a deep fake disguise. And the reason why I think these are important to look at is that this is from 20 or 30 years ago. And 20 or 30 years ago, they had deep fakes that were so perfect that they could fool you. And I was reading about this, and I was watching. There's a documentary. It's pretty good. A series of interviews actually with Jonah Mendez, who was the CIA director of disguise for 27 years. And she talked about disguises so good that you could have 6 versions of somebody in the room and not know who is the real person. Well, here you're looking at Michael Jackson as a fat, bald white guy. And now the thing is, this is way before digital deepfakes. And I've been saying since they started making this a trend that all this talk about digital deepfaking, Tom Cruise has a digital double, it's a filter on your Instagram, it's going to destroy democracy, that's misinformation. That's literally misdirection, I should say. They're trying to distract you from the fact that you've already been deepfaked. We wouldn't know how many people that we see on the world stage are just costumes. Anyway, here's Michael Jackson. New footage revealed.
Word? Stand. Say hi to the camera. Stan Winston. Hi. Ladies and gentlemen.
How are you? Hi. One of my best friends, Mr. Michael Jackson.
Michael Jackson. I don't think so. And Stan Winston.
I don't think so.
And Stan Winston, special effects artist. Back when they did special effects with real props. That's the reason why I was studying his work. I was a film studies major, and I liked real props. And I recognized this trend toward CGI, and I thought, is it because of low budget? And now I think it's because they were visually dumbing people down so we wouldn't know the difference between real and fake. Now, someone in the comments here, G33 says, history doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes, Mark Twain. Generally, I would agree with that. But I think we have evidence now that history repeats. Here we have an example of history quite literally repeating. Now, if you look at NASA's photography of the globe, they use the same clouds year after year. That could be history repeating as well. But this one's pretty blatant. You have hurricanes. Hurricane Nicole, 43 days after Hurricane Ian. Again, Nicole and Ian, 43 days apart. And this was this year in 2022. 18 years ago, in the same place, you had Hurricane Charlie, Hurricane Jean, 43 days apart. This is history repeating itself. This is from Jacob Bartol Official, who sees this as quite possibly evidence of weather control. Quote, another perfect example of weather control comes with Tropical Storm Nicole upgraded to a hurricane, making landfall in Florida 43 days after Hurricane Ian. This pattern was observed in 2004 when Jean made landfall 43 days after Charlie. Even the paths are nearly identical. What are the odds? Yes, of course, it's man-made, as most weather catastrophes are nowadays. Everything's planned and executed by the numbers. Nothing to argue with there. Copaesthetic says, wait, are they making these hurricanes? It's one of two things. You can make something up and report it as such, and people won't really have a way to 100% fact check it. They can exaggerate the weather. How many times have you seen reporters leaning into the hurricane, getting you the news, going out to the front of this thing just so you can know how bad it is? And then you see a couple in the background peacefully walking by eating popcorn. Like, okay, something's up here. There's a lot of crisis acting among meteorologists. You think that that would be the one objective area of news? No, there isn't any objective news. Yep, history repeating itself. Sleepy Random says Jussie Smollett weather. Yeah, he could do the weather. I mean, that's been a long time observed thing, though. They've been exaggerating the weather for a lot of reasons. It's not just for ratings; it's for political purposes. They're blaming Republicans. They're blaming capitalism on, well, any kind of aberrant weather is automatically going to be blamed on the other side, and both sides do it. They blame each other, or the right will say, "Look, it's not warming up; it's actually cold. You're wrong," and that's why they stopped calling it global warming. They called it climate change. It's all encompassing. All right, let's continue here. I've been covering some of Les Luther's work lately, illusion warfare reporter Les Luther, and he found some fascinating stuff about how the most viewed TikTok videos showing war in Ukraine, 13,000 of the most viewed, came from old footage, training footage, and video game footage. And his point is that the media kind of silently admits this, but just pointing out how, again, when I say that the general public is confused about what's real and what's fake, I'm not exaggerating. And the reason why is that most of them just take in the news by osmosis. They just assume it's true if it hasn't been debunked. It's just sort of a background thing. They just kind of accept it. And they end up taking in a lot of stuff that's just demonstrably false. DJ Vlad took umbrage with what Kanye said. He said, in response to Kanye, Michael Jordan's dad wasn't sacrificed. I interviewed one of the guys who killed him. It was two broke teenagers trying to steal a car. Talking about your mom's sacrifice, if you like, go ahead, but don't drag other people into your delusion. Sounds sensible. That's DJ Fed. I've heard him called DJ Vlad. But now, I went through the comments, and a number of people were debating with him about this, suggesting, like, why would you interview his dad's killer? And really just calling into question DJ Vlad's attempt at damage control. Prince Nassim says to DJ Vlad, it was a sacrifice. The dude in your interview got threatened into saying that. You're not snaking no views out of me. And there were a few others as well, but let's continue. I watched that Dave Chappelle SNL opening, and people believe that Dave Chappelle, that he's been swapped out. I don't think so. I'm not really into the whole cloning idea when someone says this or that person has been replaced. I don't think so. Now, I remember when Dave Chappelle did that Netflix special called Sold Out. There was a movie poster or a poster for it where he's posing in front of the poster that says sold out, and it has sort of a double meaning there. You know, like SOULED, and the look on his eyes. Like, I could see that, but anyway, the idea that any comedian is going to, quote, be the truth teller, no, they're gatekeepers. They have to be. That's, to me, that's just the bottom line. They use comedians for a reason. It's kind of like a steam valve, but also a way to kind of test ideas. And then to set parameters on what is funny and what isn't funny. Like, most of you probably noticed this, that late night talk shows like Jimmy Kimmel, they haven't been funny, if ever, but they have laugh tracks and they get the audience to laugh at the right things. But it's really about setting boundaries. G33 says, wasn't challenging you, throwing some Mark Twain out there. No, I agree. History rhymes, and I think they rhyme it on purpose, and it repeats for sure. But no, there's the idea of history repeating. Well, it makes sense if you think about history in the short term, like your news. Your 24-hour news cycle, it becomes history the next day. Anything that doesn't get challenged, anything that doesn't get debunked, just gets carved into stone. And in the aggregate, it becomes history. And the people writing it are consciously putting narratives and stories that reflect the past. Right now, I think we even see, you could say, prophecy in the form of predictive programming. It looks like it. How often have you seen science fiction writers referred to as prophets? Not a coincidence. Commenter here asks, and this is from God is in Control, was the Will Smith slap real? Okay, now the slap was probably fake. We don't have a good angle. Will Smith was teaching a class on how to fake slaps right before that, if you recall. In fact, you know what? I think Dane White is starting a slap league. Have you heard about this thing? Dane White's slap league, like slapping for people who can't fight. You don't want to do the MMA thing. If you can slap, I think they're calling it the Slap League. Dana White Slap Fighting League. It's called Power Slap. Dana White announces the launch of Power Slap. I thought it was a very bad parody, but this is going to air in early 2023. And yeah, it's a slapping thing. It looks pretty bad. I mean, I imagine it's going to knock teeth out and stuff. Bad for brains, I'm sure. But now this is a clip here. This is Will Smith teaching fans how to fake slap. Now, mind you, this is before he slapped Chris Rock.
So here, you come on out, you come on. All right, so here, I'm gonna do something. Next thing what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do that, right? And you just turn your head when I go. All right, and don't fall down the steps.
Again, if you're just listening, this is Will Smith, who's an adept face slapper teaching youngsters the ropes on how to wind up and deliver. TMZ obtained footage shot back in November showing Will and his King Richard co-star. Now, again, this is techniques on how to fake fights in film.
Mama instinct kicked in. Thank you, Angelo. Thank you. So, what is, I'll just go. There you go.
Again, it's Will Smith slapping some kid. Now, this to me suggests that one, yeah, faking a slap is doable, even in front of an audience. One of the first things I ask when I'm asking the question, if it's real or fake, you have to ask a series of questions. One of them is it even fakeable? I'm going to raise the question, is it even fakeable? Can you fake a slap in front of a group of people? If you thought the answer was no, well, here you have the actual culprit demonstrating how to do it. Now, he could have slapped Chris. It wouldn't make a difference, but to me, I mean, the bigger picture here is, what's the meaning of it? And I think there was a deeper meaning to it. I think there's quite a few other things you could extrapolate from it. And it all has to do with King Richard and Venus. There's a few different storylines here. The husband of Venus, the blacksmith, defending her from Zeus's advances or something, getting kicked out of Olympus. Will Smith getting kicked out of the Oscars. There are a few interesting stories tied to this one. The main one, I think, though, is the Babylonian king slapping. Yeah, king slapping ritual. This is in the Jerusalem Post. And what it suggested here, and this is not connected to the Will Smith thing, but I kind of put these things together. I think the story fits. Said here that they had a humiliation ritual for the king during the new year where he would get slapped in the face. But what's more, he had to make a show of tears. That was part of the ritual. Now I'm thinking, okay, we're looking at this slapping the king on the cheek, a humiliation ritual, ancient Babylon for the new year. The day after Will Smith slapped Chris Rock had a comedy show, a tour, that kicked off, and it was called the Ego Death Tour. Now, if you remember, he didn't talk. He didn't say anything when he got slapped right away. He just kind of took it. He made kind of a light joke, but the next day he went on the stage, and before he did anything, he started crying. Chris Rock shed tears before his comedy routine. Listen to this. It was only after the king finished the list of assurances, well prepared ahead of time, that the chief struck him hard upon the cheek, with an open hand as hard as he could. The blow had to be decisive and hard, for according to tradition, tears had to flow from the king's eyes as an indication that Bel and his wife were friendly, an omen which purported to assure the king's future success and the prosperity of the country. If there were no tears, enemies were expected to rise up and bring about the king's downfall. That's one of 3 or 4 different little stories or myths that are, I think, quite obviously attached to this thing. Before Chris Rock was even slapped, I think he even said something. He mentioned the name Macbeth, which you're not supposed to do. It's some kind of curse. Not Shock says real or fake doesn't matter. It was scripted anyway. Yeah, I don't go into real or fake. I go into why is it fake? What's the purpose of it? The real or fake thing is a trap, and it's been a trap for a long time. Is this real or is it a false flag? It's like, I think we can get past that once you understand what media is. It's not a guessing game. Like, you don't guess, well, NASA faked this rocket launch. Is the next one going to be real? And the next one. Well, once you understand that they're faking it categorically, you don't need to debunk every single one. You could opt out of it and just ignore it altogether, knowing what it is. Not taking the default belief for granted and just going with the flow. But, it's up to you how much you want to keep up with this stuff. They pack 48 hours of news into every single 24-hour period. It's a lot of information, and it's intentional. They want you to be so overwhelmed that you choose blue checks to follow, like Mark Cuban was saying. He was saying that now that they're selling blue checks on Twitter, he doesn't know who to trust. I'm like, what What a lost soul. You need blue checks to tell you what to think. And now that Musk is selling blue checks to non initiates into the club, just regular people who can afford $8, now you don't know who to trust. Very, very telling. Copaesthetic says, what if they're hoaxing the world? It's their religion. It's their right to hoax us. Interesting take. Has religion ever been anything but hoaxing? And religion, in general, I mean, I'm talking about superstition, false explanations, an elevated priesthood, an initiated priesthood, ruling over a profane, hoodwinked group of, I would say, true believers. I mean, are you a believer or a knower? I think the purpose of media is to make you into a believer. The difference is more than just nominal. What we're talking about here is if you don't have enough time to parse everything and you're trusting the blue checks, then you just believe what they tell you. You haven't actually tested it. You don't know how it's true. You just believe it. Versus those who are fact-checking things, who realize how much is BS. And we know what we know, and we know a lot of stuff isn't real, and we're not full of a bunch of false explanations. I'm a knower, not a believer. I'm a non-believer, which is one of the reasons why we are censored. You're a non-believer, what are you doing in their church? Leading them astray with your non-canonical memes. Fact-checking? You don't fact-check their scriptures. What do you mean? It's blasphemy. All right, let us continue. Wayne L. Sexton says, Will Smith taught a class at Crisis Actor Academy I attended. Oh yeah, I believe it. I believe that Wayne would be one of Will Smith's graduates, far more than one of the Gene Rosen School of Crisis Acting graduates. Those ones are terrible. They never get repeat gigs like Wayne does here. All right, let's continue going through my notes. There were so many things to get through. I tried to get to earlier today. I've been doing some digging into Christopher Nolan, and I came across some very interesting stuff. But let's stay on this. Let's stay on this king slapping thing for just a moment, because there was something else that I was looking at today. We were talking about King Kill 33, the article by James Downard about the sacrificial ritualistic meaning behind the killing of Kennedy. And for those who aren't familiar with this, King Kill 33 is really the basis. It's like the first time, I think, that a mass media event was deconstructed in the context of it being some kind of occult ritual. Well, I was doing some digging into this topic because Putin's brain brought this up in a sense. Putin's brain is this. His name is Alex Duggan, and in many ways, Alex Duggan kind of reminds me of Alex Jones. He's sort of this, this figure. He's an intellectual though, out there in Russia. Putin's brain. Anyway, his daughter was killed earlier this year, and maybe he's bitter, but he came out and he said this regarding Putin. He said, we're talking again about Putin's brain. Alexander Dugin. The Mirror can reveal the long-haired philosopher and Ukraine invasion hawk quoted from a story of the Golden Bow by James Frazer, in which a king is killed. The king was killed in the fictional story because he failed to bring rain during a drought, and he had his stomach ripped open. Again, this is Putin's brain makes a reference to the Golden Bow by James Frazer. The Golden Bow, fascinating book, but it deals with this topic of this line of, I guess, French kings who would be ritually sacrificed in order to assure the success of the kingdom if they were failing in their, and it would be like they'd be assassinated during a hunt, or it'd be more ritualistic. But anyway, the Mirror again .uk mentions here that he's quoting a story from the Golden Bow by James Frazer in which the king is killed, his stomach is ripped open. In his angry rant, Duggan wrote, quote, "We give the ruler absolute fullness of power, and he saves us all, the people, the state, the citizens, at the critical moment. If for he surrounds himself with shit or spits on social justice, this is unpleasant. Only he saves. Then the fate of the king of reigns. Now, it's kind of a bad translation, but the fate of the king of reigns, again, is saying that the king's responsible for the rain, responsible for the weather. If the king can't fulfill it, well, the king has to die. Now, it sounds brutal. A golden bow is a kind of a classic. In fact, here's another excerpt from Apocalypse Culture by Michael Hoffman, who's talking about this King Kill article, and he's putting it into context. And what I'm talking about here is going to tie into the Kennedy thing too, but Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now sweeps over a copy of Golden Bow, a book which describes the primitive blood rites of the eternal pagan psychodrama's killing of the king ceremony. Colonel Kurtz has reached that level of mythic force. Now, what he's saying here, because if you call an Apocalypse Now, Colonel Kurtz makes himself kind of a king over this tribal community in the jungle, and at the end he gets his head chopped off. He gets ritually killed, more or less, because he had gone crazy. But the whole point of it was he'd kind of accepted his fate. He was expecting it, and that's why they had that book out here. Well, here we are looking at this introduction to King Kill 33, Alchemical Conspiracy and the Death of the West. Now, this is what I was researching today. This idea that the killing of the king ritual of Kennedy, that it was part of a larger series of rituals that has to do with the death of the West. And that's what this whole thing seems to be about. But here's what I found that's new. Trinity, 7/16/1945, where the world's first nuclear device was exploded. Again, the Trinity site. The Manhattan Project, the Trinity test, 7/16/1945. Note the date, 7/16. This was the beginning of the nuclear age. And then you have 7/16 as the date of Apollo 11 launching from Kennedy Space Center. And then 7/16 is also the date of, well, Kennedy Jr. dying and Eyes Wide Shut being released. Now, the connection here, these are all connected to the work of Kubrick and his movie magic psyops. If Kubrick is behind Apollo 11, as can be, I think, demonstrated, and the Kennedy assassination, then we might even see what his work has been a part of is part of the same ritual here, all having to do with the beginning of the nuclear age, the space age. The 2001 Space Odyssey is about the transition into the new age. Again, we're looking at movies being used to convey religious drama, mythic dramas, things that are about changing the very zeitgeist. But here's where it gets even more interesting to me is that Christopher Nolan is considered to be the mantle bearer of Kubrick. If you know, this is the counterpart to Kubrick. Christopher Nolan, who's very, very well represented among meta-scripting. Of course, Dark Knight Rises, lots of predictive programming connected to Sandy Hook, to the Boston bombing. You can find COVID stuff. In other words, more of the same. Movies being used for more than just entertainment. We're talking about worldview shaping. Interestingly enough, next year, Christopher Nolan has a movie coming out called Oppenheimer about the Manhattan Project. Again, this is today's Kubrick, Manhattan Project. I'm not sure what date it's coming out. I'm going to have to check. It's called Oppenheimer. But that date, 7/16, is not the only significant date that Kubrick has used. Every time something happens with the Kennedys, you can find some kind of Kubrick connection. Dr. Strangelove came out on the day of the Kennedy assassination, 11/22/63. No coincidence that Eyes Wide Shut comes out on the day that JFK Jr. dies. Wonka World says, Apocalypse Now was a fantastic movie. Yeah, I'm going to have to watch it again. G33 says pagan lives matter. Copacetic says IPS or bust. Now, we are the only off-world stage-based news media network with a think tank actively deconstructing mass media lies real time for our own edification. It's not for entertainment. I think it's to maintain situational awareness. And maybe it's just philosophy, the love of knowing. Here's an interesting piece came out yesterday from science.slashdot.org. Douglas Adams. Douglas Adams wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. He was born on a 3/11, interestingly. Douglas Adams was right. Science Journal proves 42 is the address of the universe. I was talking about the number 42 and the significance of it in this entire occult paradigm that is just thinly disguised. But listen to this. This is again from a science journal. 42 is what defines our universe from any other version of a universe. It also determines the rate of expansion and the ground state orbital of an atom, thus reducing the number of stable universes as we understand them to just a few. So while Douglas Adams may have just been randomly picking numbers when writing Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, perhaps we live in a universe that likes to humor itself. Now the number 42 also figures in Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland. It was suggesting that if you were to connect the continents with a tunnel, and then you would just take the air out of the tunnel, you'd have a vacuum, and then you'd have a craft, and you would fall through the earth. How long would it take to go through the earth? And Alice falling down is like kind of like zero G. She just falls down the tunnel. Well, this was the idea, and I think this is all interesting how it's connected to Elon Musk and space travel and the Hyperloop and all that. But there were calculations. How long will it take, or how long would it take to travel through the earth, to fall through the earth? Now the earth is, assuming it's a ball, 25,000 miles in circumference, and they calculated it down to 42 minutes. How long would it take to fall through the earth? 42 minutes. Gravity pulls towards the center, so once you reach halfway, anyway, they've done the math. 42 seconds to fall through the earth. The number 42 is encoded into everything Musk does. Even Bezos has quite a lot. Again, I told you it's about their god of time, the god of death. It's about Saturn worship. In the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, it's the number given to the protagonist by this AI god who is asked, what's the meaning of the universe, or what's the meaning of life? And the number 42 is given as the answer. And it sounds nonsensical, but it might actually make sense if you dig into their symbolic system and what it all actually means. Now, I don't get too deep into their numerology, but I do find that you can kind of intuit what it all means by context. Context is what puts a lot of these things into a way that you can, look, this is significantly, these symbols are always grouped together. What's with the number 33 always being associated with Christ and the burning man and the phoenix? And I think we've come to some pretty accurate conclusions about what these things mean as far as our interpretations. All right, let me go and play this clip. This is Rush Limbaugh, the mayor of Realville, and I referred to him as close as you can be to real on the world stage. I mean, he still accepts all basic world stage assumptions about everything. However, there are times where he's inadvertently auto-hoaxing things. I think in 2009-ish, he was saying, NASA discovering water on Mars is probably a hoax. Well, yeah, Mars is a hoax. But sure, water on Mars, hoax, obviously. And he said it was because the Democrats needed money for their environmentalist stuff. It's like, yeah, you're half right. More than half. In the right direction, but you'll never get the truth because you're a world stager. But this is pretty good here. This is Limbaugh, like in 1933, talking about the, quote, current thing.
Why? Because I'm wearing these ribbons. I care more than any of you about anything. And these ribbons say so. I want you people sitting at home and you people in the audience, look down at your lapel right now. I want you to do this. Put the camera back on me. Do this. When you look down, what do you see? You don't see anything because you're not wearing any ribbons. It means you're a bigot. It means you're a racist. It means you're a sexist. It means you're a homophobe. It probably means you're a white guy. It probably means you're a European. And you alone are responsible for all the ills of America. But I'm not, because I'm wearing these ribbons.
And he has a point there. And, kind of reminds me of ribbon bullies. Remember ribbon bullies? Where Kramer wouldn't wear the AIDS ribbon. And the AIDS marchers like, why aren't you wearing a ribbon? He's like, I don't want to wear a ribbon. They gang up on him. They beat him up. They acted like, why aren't you wearing a mask? The mask Karens. I'm going to play a clip here. This is Kramer won't wear an AIDS ribbon.
No thanks.
You don't want to wear an AIDS ribbon?
No.
But you have to wear an AIDS ribbon.
I have to?
Yes.
Yeah, see, that's why I don't want to.
But everyone wears the ribbon. You must wear the ribbon.
You're a ribbon bully.
You're a ribbon bully. Thank you, Nico Trumas. We at IPS appreciate the support. He says, thanks for all the great information, Tim. Yeah, I say thanks to the think tank. We have hundreds and hundreds of sets of eyes and ears paying attention. And we consolidate all of that information in our Discord servers and on all of our networked blogs and channels. And we do tend to filter the best information. And we pretty much have been cutting edge this entire time. The media thinks we are the fringe, but it's actually kind of the opposite. This is, again, Kramer not wearing the AIDS ribbon. What a bigot.
Yes.
Yeah, see, that's why I don't want to.
But everyone wears the ribbon. You must wear the ribbon.
What you are? You're a ribbon bully.
Now, later, of course, he's marching, and this is 2020. Just replace ribbon for mask.
Hey, where's your ribbon?
Oh, I don't wear the ribbon. You don't wear the ribbon? Aren't you against AIDS?
Yeah, I'm against AIDS.
Aren't you against AIDS? That's just the mentality, though. You're not for what I'm for. You must be against it. The basic Jedi mind trick, and it fools most people.
Walking, aren't I? Just don't wear the ribbon.
Who do you think you are?
Put the ribbon on.
Hey, Cedric, Bob, this guy won't wear a ribbon.
Who? Who doesn't want to wear the ribbon?
Anyway. Classic. COP27, will God deliver 10 commandments for climate change? I try not to talk about it too often. I think everyone here already knows, but climate change is a modern flood myth. And NASA, NOAA, they've appropriated Old Testament symbology, the dove, the arcs, the angel warning us, only it's a satellite. Your wickedness is going to cause the flood. The modern flood myth with our Noahs being the scientists. But listen to this. And of course, the angry globe is the new god. And he's heating up. He's so mad at you. Or she. I mean, what is it? Gaia, which is the name of the Earth God, and also the global AI initiative that the World Economic Forum 666 is getting behind. AI to augment or replace government. But Gaia is a girl. But when I look at their symbolism, the Earth God with the obelisk is decidedly male. Not sure what they're doing. Did they... I don't think it's a mistake. I think it's... I don't know. I'm not going to read too much into it, but listen to this. This is showing you how much of it is, in fact, a religion. They do worship this earth god. Moses led the people out of the camp toward God, and they took their place at the foot of the mountain. Now Mount Sinai was all in smoke. This is when God was speaking to Moses on top of the mountain, passing on the holy law. But this is now getting to the point where they're suggesting here that, here we go, the United Nations Climate Change Conference in proximity to Mount Sinai could be the prime time for the force of religion to speak climate truth to dirty power for the world, especially for Israel. 3 months later, I found myself humming George Harrison's I Really Want to See You, Lord, while climbing the mount with my friends in the heat of August in search of a climate miracle, or at least a message, maybe 10 of them. Again, talking about wanting to find 10 climate change commandments. Yeah, it's definitely a cult. It really is a religion. And then to reciprocate the energy of the weekend protest, the finger of God appeared like the one that etched in stone the first set of 10 commandments, a plague of air pollution darkness descending on Beijing, and supercharged monsoons in India, just like this year's floods in Pakistan, Mississippi, Hurricane Ian in Florida. The hearts of leaders melted like ice caps. He's describing this religious conversion as people realize that they need to come up with some kind of vision or, quote, 10 climate commandments from religious leaders. Creator of the universe, send us a sign that we should proceed with the climate covenant, the 10 climate commandments here at Mount Sinai during COP27. I prayed with my hands pointed up with hope and fear. Now this is obviously absurd. I don't know if it's parody. I actually don't think it is. But NBC has climate confessionals, which we've gone through, and I check them occasionally to see. And I wouldn't even put one down here as a joke. I'm pretty sure if you confess to one of these climate sins, the CCP has you in some kind of a book. Climate confessions. For those who care deeply about the planet's future and still slipping up now and then, you can make up for falling short. What do? Do you blast your AC? Do you throw out your lunch? Do you grill a steak? Share your anonymous confession with NBC News. Plastics, transportation, paper, food waste, energy, or meat. These are all the categories of sin. You just click it and you enter your particular error. For example, this is an anonymous confession. I use reusable plastic bags to offset deforestation. I still eat red meat. I've been trying to eat beans. I'm writing my confession on a cell phone made of plastic. I still use plastic bags. I commute alone. I'm a good recycler, except I overuse paper towels for my old cats. They're very messy, and I use them to avoid excessive cat hair. Selfish. That's just selfish. Like the people who wouldn't mask up. Like, you ought to just deal with the cat hair for Gaia. And what they want you to do is they want you to make sacrifices for Mother Earth or Father Earth. Every time you go to the recycling bin, you are in fact genuflecting before an altar, the green altar. The symbol on the side of the recycling bin of the 3 arrows, it does form in the negative space a hexagram symbol of Saturn, the Earth God. Not a coincidence. Not a coincidence, it's 3 arrows like 3 nails for a crucified, dying, resurrecting Earth God archetype, which is what we're actually seeing. The green god, Osiris, the original god of vegetation and the earth, the god of death, resurrection, associated with Saturn, who's actually more or less an agrarian thing. The entire death thing is because the harvest. That's the scythe. You know, it's the annual harvest. But anyway, yes, the earth god is the god of the world, Gaia. Climate Confessions. All right, this is a new documentary. I haven't seen it, but I might check it out. Thanks to Moo for posting it. It's called It All Falls Down, exploring the controversy around Ye, his anti-Semitic comments sparking a firestorm. What in the conversation is missing? Now, this is just more underscoring how accurate we've been here. This idea that, you know, it all falls down. Back in January, and I can point to the mind maps, we were talking about the fire at the Northwest Tower in the Bronx and how it was foreshadowing the fall of the West. And we were bringing up Kanye West's difficulties at the time with Pete Davidson and how we were saying, look, the burning down of the West with this Pluto return is going to coincide with the burning down of Kanye West's world. Just a prediction that came true. And again, just reiterating it here, it's sticking pretty strictly to the script as we've called it. All right, we covered a few new things, interesting points here again. The space age, if you want to look at the Apollo as the real beginning of it, man on the moon, they took off on 7/16. Trinity site, we entered the nuclear age, 7/16. 7/16 is connected with Eyes Wide Shut. But these are all just Kubrick connections. Fascinating. Matthew Modine, who played Joker in Full Metal Jacket, compares Christopher Nolan to Stanley Kubrick, and they've worked together a few times. I'm going to do a deeper study on Christopher Nolan's work and others, but one of the things I like to do is I like to look at the authors of this metascript, the writers that are charged with promulgating these deeper stories. And there's a small group of them, and they have a lot of things in common. Not a coincidence that Christopher Nolan has a connection to Aleister Crowley through Nathan Crowley. Going through some comments here. Sleepy Random says these people deserve to be stoned. Are you talking about the greenies, the earth worshippers? The globe god is really mad at the people that don't worship him. If you're not recycling, because think about what recycling is, and this is why climate confessions, when I first read that, I was like, wait a minute, I was already describing recycling as a climate confession. You buy all your goods because you're a consumer, which is dirty. It's bad for the world, but you buy all your goods. Now, some of your goods have wrappers and trash associated with it that is recyclable. Others do not. Your recyclables represent good decisions. The things that are green, the things that are sustainable. It means some of your choices were good, some were bad. When you go into a confession booth, what you're doing is you're separating your choices as a sinner. Your good choices from your bad choices, but you're always a sinner, but you want to err on the side of good. Well, you're always a polluter, but if you can mitigate that by making better decisions, and then you put the evidence of your good decisions in the recycling bin, which is merely a token gesture. It does nothing to save the planet. Never has, never will. It's never been sustainable. It's always been a major league hoax. Recycling is a joke. It's just theater. And it's false piety. When you see someone actually recycling and making a big deal about it, thinking they're saving the planet, like, no, they're not. And ask them, what did you do with your PPE? If you didn't have that stuff autoclaved and properly disposed of in red biohazard containers set aside for pathological waste or biohazardous waste, then it's in the ocean. You just undid all the good that you tried to do by recycling. Again, that's confession. You're confessing to the globe god. This is what I did right. This is what I did wrong. Please don't flood me. Please don't fire NATO me. All right, let's continue here. Alex Jones ordered to pay $473 million more. He's going to have to sell a lot of super male pills. Is there enough? Are there enough super male vitality pills, and is there a big enough market for him to come up with $1 trillion to give to the Sandy Hookers? And what are they going to do with that money? That's another question. Can the world even sustain it? The world can barely sustain billionaires. Can it sustain trillionaires? I don't think so. And if we make all these crisis actors into trillionaires, Gaia is going to be very displeased. You know what's interesting about that proposition, though? I remember saying a couple of years ago that the GAG, the Government Actors Guild, that crisis acting is the new Hollywood. I said this after Vegas. I said, note the celebrities that get into it. They comment on it, they add their 2 cents, they put out a music video about it. And I was saying for some time, crisis acting is the new Hollywood. And now look, you got the highest paid actors ever are all crisis actors. I mean, what a settlement. $1 billion. All right, this has been great. 11:15, big day. Will it be a third party? Will it be another, I don't know, what's it going to be, JFK Jr.? Oh, that's another thing to keep an eye out for. 7:22. I'm going to make a prediction here because I don't have any information. I haven't visited Q Street today. But last year, 11:22. Last year on November the 22nd, the QAnoners were drinking bleach and Kool-Aid, waiting for JFK to show up at the grassy knoll, Dealey Plaza, and he didn't show up. Why wouldn't they show up this year? I'm kind of expecting something. So my prediction is there's going to be some kind of Q gathering in Dallas on 11/22. Another thing on 11/22, one of the officers responsible for the death of is it Breonna Taylor? Yeah, the one who I guess somehow they screwed up or messed with the warrant and it resulted in Breonna Taylor's death. Anyway, the officer who's responsible for that is going to be sentenced on 11/22. Should be an interesting date. If you're in Dallas and you go down to Dealey Plaza in a JFK mask, you'll be swarmed by adoring worshipers. And they do worship him. If you go to Kennedy Sunday on Twitter, you'll see that every Sunday the QAnoners post pictures of JFK, thinking that JFK is going to see this stuff and that he's responding to it. I'll follow some of this blue pill drama. The main thing I'm looking at is this. There's this Republican civil war between Trump and DeSantis, and people are trying to get rid of Trump. The thing is, DeSantis and Trump are both on Team Crisis Actor for one. They're both political leaders. If you're voting for them, it's fine. LARP if you want to. But noticing how DeSantis literally copies Donald Trump's hand gestures tells you everything you need to know. You're dealing with actors. And there's a slight possibility that DeSantis is the grown-up Adam Walsh. I brought this up earlier today. Kind of like Kate Perry being JonBenet Ramsey. You have some crisis actors who have these early on gigs in their lives where maybe it's a tragedy. Going down, Robert Bell says, is space debris cover for Earthlink being shot down? I've been hearing that lately. Well, a couple of weeks ago, the Russians did say that that it was open season. They've been saying this for some time, that they have every right to shoot down commercial satellites if they're interfering. And we could already be having space wars. We've already had, I think they even used the phrase shadow space wars, suggesting that Russia was already jamming and hacking satellites just to test it. Now, in case you don't know, space is all, in my view, it's all just theater. I'm not a reality denialist, but I'm not a believer in outer space. Nothing they have shown me thus far has been all that convincing. I don't believe we're on a CGI ball with clouds that repeat every 10 years. And there are a lot of reasons why I think the whole thing is just a bad joke on all of us. And here's one of the reasons. This is a clip from, Space News. And this reporter is totally deadpan with this.
And now scientists have made some incredible new discoveries about the planet Uranus. They found out exactly how the planet's magnetic field works, revealing that Uranus opens and closes to let out solar wind. And astronomers say the process does occur every day. The data was recorded in 1986 by the Voyager 2 spacecraft.
Right. Take that very seriously. Yeah. How many billions of dollars do they get for their satellites, their programs where they give us, endless mockery is what it comes down to. You get rocks shaped like skulls near Halloween. You get snowmen looking objects in space around Christmas. They're constantly making stuff up. And I would even say that SpaceX is just a big joke. SpaceX, definitely this fertility cult. That's the obsession with the obelisks. I have a tweet here I want to point out. This is from Les Luther. The British intelligence services call it chicken feed. Now, chicken feed is completely useless information placed purposely to be found by truthers. In other words, little clues and hints and misdirection. Truther NPCs live on a diet of chicken feed. And this makes me think about the QAnoners. I mean, it's kind of sad, but here we are, 2022, 5 years after the first Q drop started. In fact, the first Q drop was on 10/28/2017, Bill Gates' birthday. First drop. these things they're not random, but it's a purposeful misinformation, misdirection campaign. Think about it. 1,776 days from the first Q drop, the Queen drops. Her death was 911 days after the novel Corona, 311. And we can find many examples of precise alignments between major events. And I'm saying that they lead you with these trails that are, of course, controlled. Whoever's providing the chicken feed is probably not trustworthy. But I see a lot of people on the world stage, following these little hints and clues. And yes, we are being led somewhere. And that's why I look at the bigger picture. This reset thing, Great Reset, is the same as the Great Awakening, but the people on the side of Great Awakening want that. They want Nasara, Jasara, the free money. But the side on the Great Reset, no, they want universal basic income. Marxist paradise on Mars. But it's really two different paths to reaching the same eventual outcome. We covered Kanye West alluding to the Illuminati connection, controlling people through monetizing and traumatizing. We've been talking about Stop Oil throwing soup and paint in order to save the planet. And if you're just looking at the screen, this is Planet Propane. This is posted by @TheFlatEarther. It has a lot of people befuddled. They're saying, what planet is that? It looks like Earth, but those aren't any continents that we recognize here. It must be some kind of exoplanet. And all the scientists will be like, yeah, obviously it's an exoplanet. What are you, a flat earther? You can't tell that's not one of the planets in our solar system. It therefore must be an exoplanet. Well, it turns out, no, this is not an exoplanet. This is a close-up through a GoPro lens of a rusty propane tank. Just pointing out how easy it is to fake a sphere and fool people. Not that you needed any reminder of this. The space salami pretty much sums it up. All right, I think we've covered everything. We'll be back likely tomorrow morning for updates. Going to follow very closely with what's happening in Arizona. I don't know if it's sore loserism or elections are being purposefully stolen in order to incite, or perhaps I don't know what it is. I mean, in my view, it's all theater, but you can see how they're engineering something and they're creating a bit of unrest. And maybe it'll manifest tomorrow. Will Trump create a third party? I don't know. I think it would be interesting. All right, this is COVID Cooties by Symbia. I'm going to return this back to the 24/7. If you want the archives, subscribe to the newsletter.